And we have coming up right now the man who put this all together, a man who is totally brave and has put himself at a certain personal risk to be able to bring all these people together from all over the country and all over the world. And I'm talking about John White. And John White, if you haven't met him yet, he's now your new best friend. Because this guy is an example of what leadership looks like and what one man can do. And I'm just going to give you a final quick example of how just one of us can make a difference. We have found that high fructose corn syrup, everyone in here know what that is? Everyone in here not want to get near that stuff by 100 miles? We know what it does. We know what it does to the liver. We know what it does to blood sugar. We know what it does just in general. Well, it took about 14 to 16% of us as a population to learn about it and start talking about it on the internet and saying this stuff is really bad. That small amount was enough to scare the hell out of the corporations, Kellogg's, Post, General Mills, the other ones that actually produce this stuff and put it in cereals and in sodas for them to withdraw it. If you go into the grocery store today and look at Post Raisin Bran, across the top of the box in a yellow banner with red printing, it will say no high fructose corn syrup. They have changed their business model because of you, and only from a tiny volume of us. That's all it takes. This is the good news. It's not like some democracy where it has to be a majority of 63% of us, like in Congress. It does not need to be that. A handful of us vocally, passionately putting it forth will change corporate behavior, and that's one of the end games today. So the man who has done that, who has made this possible for us today, is John White. Let me introduce him now. That's you, John.
Thanks, man. Hey, everybody. I've been so busy, I haven't had a chance to get nervous. I always like that. Thanks for coming. Welcome to the first Consciousness Beyond Chemtrails conference and fundraiser. This is really what we're hoping is going to become a driving force of more vehicles for awareness, more conferences, more documentaries, more action. All of you here today in person and all of you here today online are taking action. I'm not sure if Harrison mentioned it, but everybody's watching online. They're going to be able to download all of the content after this event is over. They're going to be able to download every presenter and distribute it throughout their communities and get the word out. So we really want this to be able to go worldwide. It's really an honor to have not just a beautiful LA audience, but also to have an international audience, because this problem is certainly not isolated to Los Angeles. This is a worldwide issue. It's in minimum 29 countries. I'm sure there's many more. So we're able to reach everybody, which I think is excellent. I wanted to just talk for a moment of why I'm here and why I decided to put this event together. It's always through personal experience that we are driven towards action. It's when something really touches us and affects us that we move. It puts us in motion, it puts us in gear. And I was in international textile manufacturing in Southeast Asia, and we were working with heavy metals in the manufacturing process. So what happened was a great deal of the workers on the manufacturing lines would actually suffer from heavy metal toxicity poisoning. The signs and symptoms are ones that you guys may recognize today among the fellow people around you who are not aware of this issue and who are not detoxing. Vertigo, sleeplessness, discoloration, people would get dizzy, they would lose their balance. I mean, it was really pretty telltale signs of heavy metal toxicities. What we did at that time was we then developed a heavy metal-free textile manufacturing process. And the difference was amazing. It really was. The people who were working at the new facility didn't show any of the signs of the people working in the old manufacturing facility with the heavy metals. So that was kind of the background with heavy metal toxicity. And what happened was I moved to Central California, and I started to recognize the same heavy metal toxicity symptoms in myself that I saw in China. So there's no heavy metal manufacturing, there's no heavy manufacturing whatsoever where I am. So I said, where is this content coming from? At that point, the only place I could look was up. And once I started looking up, I started noticing things. I like to call, I have a friend who says that people like myself were called sleepers. It means that we were literally walking through a trance state. So many of us see it today around us. There is a matrix which has been designed to keep us in a trance state. The media, the constant programming on television and advertising, it keeps us looking down. It keeps us in a trance state. It keeps us really out of the pursuit of consciousness and the pursuit of oneness. And it certainly doesn't have us looking towards corruptions against us. So my awakening came with my heavy metal toxicity. From that, I started looking up. I then was led to Michael Murphy's film. From there, the pieces started to come together very quickly for me. I had to take action in terms of finding out what was in the air, what was in the rain. So we started something called Chemtrails Project. And we started testing rainwater around the country, but we also started testing it in the UK. We just started testing in Australia. So we're really doing a global reach. And what we found was the same thing that all of the geoengineering patents have been telling us. Aluminum, barium, strontium, some manganese. So at that point I said, this is real. This is not theory. This is certainly not conspiracy theory. It's not that grouping conspiracy which allows people to write it off and turn ahead to it. So I took a snapshot of our entire movement, everybody here, everybody who's doing great research, and I said, you know, there's one thing we're really missing, in my opinion, and that was a flagship event, something where we could all meet together, worldwide, online and in person, and compile all of the different data, all of the different research, and review it together. There is going to be research here that covers every arm of the spray agendas. The connection to GMOs, the very obvious connection to GMOs as it relates to food, crops, as it also relates to things like you'll hear about, such as genetically modified trees, plant life. Everything that is living around us is being modified. A synthetic world being built around us, and the driving vehicle for that is geoengineering. We're going to hear about how it relates to transhumanism. We're going to hear about how it relates to weather modification, how it relates to the profitability of more corporations, which of course is always the at least top layer to all of the conspiracies, and all of the tyranny is always profit. We're going to review all of that, and we're going to have a chance to really break it down together. There's going to be some information here, no doubt, that may not resonate with you, because my intent was to cover every single arm of the agenda. So if something doesn't resonate with you, just let it pass. Take what does resonate with you and please further that research. Get the word out in your communities. Just really push that information along. And it's a long conference. It's 3 days. So, we are all troopers. We're sitting here, and you can see the passion from everybody, not just here, but, online. There are people around the world doing viewing parties. There's even people who set up a viewing party in a bar, and they're all getting together to watch it. It's great. There's just some real passion and some real fire and some motivation. So, it's quite an honor to be able to put this on for everybody. So, I'm hoping that everybody can take away, of course, the awareness. Everybody can spread the awareness. And we really just want everybody to feel like they're not alone in the issue. There's too many of these things are created to isolate us. They're created to make us feel alone, make us feel helpless. Little old me, I have no power. We are showing that we have power, we are aware, and we are taking action. We are taking community action. We are also leading along the lines to being at a point of consciousness which is beyond all of this. Hence the name of this conference, Consciousness Beyond Chemtrails. We don't want to just look at the issues and say we're doomed. That is not the case. That more and more people like us are waking up every single day. And when we reach critical mass, we will absolutely affect change. It happened throughout the course of history, every single time. It is happening right now in GMOs. The world is waking up in unison. It is the most beautiful, magnificent thing, and we can all see it. And that's going to happen with geoengineering. Patience is a key. Understanding of our fellow brothers who cannot see it, because we have to remember they are programmed to not see it. As many of us were programmed by this electronic matrix to not see things, they were also programmed. So we have to have patience with them. When they're ready for the information, they will wake up to it, and they will join us. And it's happening in droves. So it really is a wonderful thing. The last point I just wanted to leave with you guys is there's one thing that no tyranny can ever suppress, and that is the awakening. This awakening is not something that is one day you're like, hey, wait a minute, I think I understand that this is not normal contrails, or I think I understand that GMOs are not good for me. As all of you realize, I am sure, it is much more than that. It is a personal journey as well. There is always seeds of doubt being planted. There is always so-called science being thrown at us to try to shut down our perspectives, to try to make us more closed-minded and keep us in the hive. We always need to resist that, because we always need to remember that first moment of awakening, that first beautiful moment where we burst out and said, I'm awake, these are all lies, I can see the tyranny around me, and I've had enough of it. Hold that awareness, hold that awakening, and nothing can stop us.
It's all about getting the word out there and allowing people the opportunity to open up and understand exactly what's happening, and then for us all together as the collective that's being so affected by all of this to work on solutions together. And that's what we're all about. Our next speaker, or our first speaker for today, is quite accomplished. He worked for Bechtel Power with a background in solar energy, and I promise that we're not going to hold this against him. He's the founder of, or he's actually a member of GeoEngineeringWatch.org. It's one of the most comprehensive websites on the spray agendas, and so that's GeoEngineeringWatch.org. You'll want to visit that site. He is certainly one of the most well-researched, reputable faces in the movement. And his title today for his presentation is Geoengineering, Why You Should Care. I'd like you all to give a warm welcome to Dave Wigington.
Good morning to all those who managed to get up this time of day for this event. I appreciate that. I think those of you that are here realize the gravity of the situation that we face. The case I'll try to make today is that geoengineering, if one looks at the data that's available, is a very all-encompassing issue, and one that rationally supersedes a long list of other legitimate issues. The totality of implication from geoengineering is difficult to get one's arms around. The effects it's having on the planet today would be impossible to quantify. The process by which I became involved with this issue was my background in solar. I have one of the largest off-grid solar homes in Northern California, and in 2001, 2002, when I began to lose on certain days 50, 60, 70% of my solar uptake from whatever aircraft were emitting overhead, it was very apparent that something was wrong. And an investigation quickly led me to the subject of geoengineering. And after perhaps a year and a half of research, I began to do water testing. And Northern California, being the jet stream that comes off the Pacific, was thought to have pristine air and precipitation. And a water test initially of 7 parts per billion of aluminum in a single rain event Over the course of 5 years, that aluminum count escalated as high as 3,450 parts per billion. That's nearly a 50,000% increase. And over the course of a decade now of research on this issue, I have in fact come to the conclusion that it is the most dire issue we face, short of nuclear contamination. To the skeptics, of which there are still a multitude, I would ask, why in the world would we not believe this is going on when we have officials currently in the Obama administration, John Holdren, Obama's science advisor, who openly have shown support for these programs? Why would we not believe this spraying is occurring when you have groups of scientists like the Arctic Methane Emergency Group, who have, for the third time, called for immediate wartime scale geoengineering? On that group, there are geoengineers. Ken Caldera, I'm told, is one of those. Why would we not believe this when everything we see in the sky matches exactly what patents describe as an express goal, the blocking of the sun, solar obscuration? Why would we not believe this is occurring when the material showing up on the ground in dozens and dozens of tests in our county alone, not to mention those around the world, are exactly the same elements named in a long list of geoengineering patents? The only defense I've really heard, the primary defense from those that would deny this issue, are the government wouldn't do that to us. That's a very, very, very lame defense, and I think we have enough history to know that, as we have seen already from the W&D in Iraq, from Agent Orange, from the Gulf oil spill, and a long list of other issues. One thing we can be sure of is the governments, in fact, lie. The global power structure, as you've already seen in many of the other presenters' statements, it seems intent on controlling everything. And in trying to do so, has put virtually everything at risk. And as these programs go on, I'll outline the decimation they are causing, which many people are unaware of. The decimation of the ozone layer, if many have felt how intense the sun is on your face of late. There's a massive ozone hole over the northern hemisphere now that Canadian scientists on a research team are being muzzled on this issue. And this is not the southern hemisphere ozone hole that we've all heard about for several decades. This is new. And the damage is already showing up in Northern California where we live. We're seeing cases of leaf scorch, bark scorch, and other symptomatic signs of this very, very intense UV. And there is no scientific dispute on the effect of particulates in the atmosphere in relation to destroying ozone. There's no dispute even amongst the geoengineers. Any particulate in the atmosphere will in fact destroy ozone. So, in the course of the stated goal of geoengineering, that we are told to, it's a climate mitigation, they are literally painting us into a corner with a long list of issues. Everybody's aware of the drought that's going on right now, another issue in which there is no dispute in the scientific community. Geoengineering particulates, any particulates in the atmosphere, diminish and disperse rainfall, period. Too many condensation nuclei, I believe that we went over in the film, causes rainfall to migrate elsewhere. It reduces evaporation. At this point right now, the atmosphere is so saturated with these particulates that the latest figures on global dimming show it somewhere in the range of 20%. 20% of the sun's direct rays are no longer reaching the planet. Many might wonder why the NATO powers have all now reduced or eliminated their renewable energy programs, like solar. That's why solar is going into the ditch. Well, it doesn't make much sense to spend billions spraying the sky, blocking the sun, and then try to do renewable energy. Sure seems like a backward step, I would say. There is also there are feedback loops that now appear to be triggered, and this is an area that I don't think many in the movement have covered. It's more my area of study and research. And It's these feedback loops that I believe will help us expose geoengineering. As they decimate the climate, as they thwart Earth's natural processes, they are certainly playing a part in the triggering of events that now seem to be underway. Many have heard about the methane releases occurring in places in the Arctic, but the seeps they show are meaningless in comparison to the field that now seems to be releasing in the East Siberian Shelf of the Arctic. And again, if people don't understand what methane is, it's a greenhouse gas that is many times more potent than CO2. And I know we have the argument, many within this movement have made a point of beating the drum that climate change is a hoax. And I think we've alienated many from the academic community by beating that drum. Certainly, whatever the cause, there is no denying that anthropogenic warming is happening. And I'm not here to speak on that issue, but I'm saying if you have jets circling the sky, covering the planet, shredding the ozone layer, killing the boreal forests, that's a human-caused warming event by itself. And so what these guys are doing to the climate, literally, aside from being poisoned, aside from all the effects from the spraying itself, they are potentially triggering other mechanisms on the planet that now have a life of their own, that are now global game-changing events on their own. And this is what needs to be considered, and to not alienate academia and deny a very obvious fact of which we see around the planet right now. The spraying, as has already been alluded to, certainly, although it can create, I believe the data reflects this, it can create temporary and regional cooling effects, certainly, at the cost of a worsened overall warming, because the radiant heat is trapped. And again, as the ozone layer is shredded, more UV intensity penetrates the planet. That heats seawater. The warmer seawater is now releasing methane hydrates from the sea floor, again on the East Siberian Shelf. So the totality of damage being done by geoengineering, again, is difficult to comprehend. As I said, the shredding of the atmosphere, the diminishment of rain, global oxygen content is now plummeting. Many don't realize this. And when you poison the boreal forests, these are northern latitude forests, Siberia, Pacific Northwest, etc. These are the lungs of the planet. When you saturate those forests with bioavailable aluminum, the effects of which are well documented, then these trees do not grow as they should. They do not uptake nutrients as they should. They do not emit oxygen as they should. So again, as the title of this talk, Geoengineering, Why You Should Care, because they are thwarting every natural mechanism on the planet. They are thwarting every avenue by which the planet would respond to the damage done to it. And I believe in doing so are making an already dark situation much, much worse. On the methane issue, again, this is an issue that could change our reality in the course of 1 or 2 years, and we're already seeing the effects of that. We've had 50,000 temperature records set in the continental U.S. so far this year, and yet they spray away. They spray away and continuing to trap heat overall in the atmosphere and continuing to damage the ozone layer and thwarting the rainfall. On geoengineeringwatch.org, we have been posting satellite photos of the North Pacific. Many have noticed of late that the overhead spraying is reduced. It's certainly reduced in our area in Northern California. But the satellite imagery shows massive blanket spraying of the North Pacific. And this, in effect, is shutting down the hydrological cycle, which keeps the rain from coming into the continent. It keeps cyclonic rotation from forming. We're now seeing the same type of blanket spraying in the Southern Pacific off the coast of South America. We're seeing similar spraying off the coast of Western Europe. So whatever they're doing differently with the experiment, make no mistake, they have not stopped. They have not stopped. They have not slowed down. In addition to the methane issue, the Arctic ice pack is absolutely, positively coming apart. All the science says so. And again, my talk is not to advocate global warming. It's not to be an Al Gore fan. I'm not. I'm not a carbon credit fan. But I'm simply trying to make the point that the medical industry exists to capitalize off death and suffering. We all agree on that. That doesn't mean death and suffering isn't happening. And whatever the cause of the damage to the planet, I think we can point the finger at this moment squarely at geoengineering. Unless or until it stops, we should blame everything on that for the moment. Although we should all take responsibility for the fact that the decimation of the planet certainly is happening on top of geoengineering. But the Arctic ice pack right now, again, adds to this total equation. I'm trying to paint the picture that if these climate issues are not stopped, if the methane release happens, if the Arctic ice pack is eliminated, that, and all fueled by the spraying on top, as a causal factor here, that if the planet is not allowed to respond, we'll very soon have little to care about. The latest data from Biomass, it's a data logging center on the Arctic ice thickness. It looks as if the Arctic ice pack may break up this year. Many have heard 2100, many have heard 2070, 2050. The latest data suggests this year. And I believe this will help us in the end to expose geoengineering, because as cataclysmic as these climate events are, I believe it will make it very difficult for the powers that be to hide these programs and what they're doing. So if there's a silver lining in these events that are now unfolding, I believe it will be to expose geoengineering. If the ice breaks up, ice pack reflects about 92 to 93% of the sun's incoming rays. That's the albedo of the ice. That's the claim purpose of geoengineering, to reflect the sun's rays. Again, a short-term cooling at the cost of a much worsened overall warming in the end. So as the ice pack breaks up and seawater is exposed, now you have 90+% of the sun's rays absorbed. Again, that heats the seawater, which releases the methane from the seafloor. The temperature change releases this methane, and methane releases in entire fields. The Bermuda Triangle, of which many have heard lots of stories about, the scientific consensus is the Bermuda Triangle is methane release, period. As methane is released from the seafloor, it aerates the water like a bottle of champagne, and ships cannot hold their buoyancy. So this methane release has been going on for a very long time. And again, the reason I'm harping on this methane, no pun intended, that I'm focusing on this methane issue so much is because it's happened twice in the Earth's past. 255 million years ago, into the Permian era, and 55 million years ago, Paleocene, Eocene, both mass extinctions. 70% terrestrial extinction, 94% ocean extinction. So the mechanisms which may have been triggered by the spraying are much broader than people already understand. It's not just poisoning the air we breathe, poisoning the soils we need to grow in, poisoning the waters we need, which is bad enough, certainly, but there are much bigger events that appear now to have been triggered. The species extinction rate today is 1,000 times natural variability. As I stated in the film, that's 100,000% of normal. You don't see our media talking much about this. And this morning, as I make myself watch Fox News and CNN, and just, I make myself view these things to see how idiotic it all is, and this sort of garbage about what the new Happy Meal is, and what Mitt Romney said yesterday about his tax returns, and all the ridiculousness, while the planet is literally in meltdown, while the spraying continues and sucks the noose around our neck with every day that they saturate us with these particulates. I think the public as a whole obviously does not want the truth about many issues, but this truth won't be ignored much longer. The damage we've seen in my area, in the forests, are incredible. As water testing taken by Francis Mangels, a very honorable former U.S. Forest Service biologist in our area, who has historically taken water tests of the tributary streams in what was thought to be a pristine forested area, and measured a decline in aquatic insect life of up to 95% over a decade. This is staggering. Some years back, 2 or 3 years back, I published data on returning salmon in our region that had also amazingly declined 95%. So at what point does this become a crisis that can't be ignored? I think we're very, very near that point. If there were more honorable men like Francis Mangels, this would not be hidden. I personally know people with California Department of Fish and Game, biologists who know of this issue and are extremely alarmed but unwilling to speak out for obvious reasons. I know people with United States Department of Agriculture. Soil scientists that I've tested soils with in the forest floor came up with measurements that were 10 to 15 times higher than they were only a few years back. Because we do have solid soil baseline pH studies in our Northern California counties. These scientists also, aware of the geoengineering, also unwilling to speak out. 2 months ago, I was at a marine laboratory in the Pacific Coast that has NOAA employees. When I convinced one female employee to talk to me off the record, she made it clear to me that they absolutely know these programs are going on. Again, unwilling to speak out for obvious reasons, but they are alarmed as hell, in their words. And the argument however futile this battle has seemed so far, academia knows this is occurring. They know. And if the dam could be broken, I believe it would break from 100 different directions. People who are beginning to realize that their silence will not save them. In fact, it will sink them. And I believe we're nearing the point where we may be able to break that dam. There are scientists, and I know some of these as well, who exist in their bubble. They do not want to see outside of that bubble. I've personally had communication with Ken Caldera. Many are familiar with his name. And it seems he exists in some sort of alternate reality. And when I was glared at by David Keith for 15 minutes after the fateful question in the 2010 AAAA conference in AAAS in San Diego, where he admitted on the record, had they done any studies for human respiratory effects? No. Environmental toxicity? No. They had done nothing. And his final statement was, could terrible things happen tomorrow? We don't know. What sort of statement is that from a scientist who's proposing, as if it wasn't already happening, the dumping of 20 million tons of ultrafine aluminum nanoparticles into the atmosphere? What sort of a statement is that? And to put that into context, to reach that amount of material in the atmosphere, I believe mathematically that's somewhere between 500 and 600 flights a day with 100-ton payloads per flight. The sheer quantity of material it takes to change the soil pH of the forest floor is truly astounding. And we do see that in our area. And we see the trees that are sensitive to that are dying. Again, back to the boreal forests being the lungs of the planet. And as those are slowly but surely poisoned, our oxygen content plummets, the ozone is shredded, the ice is melted from the Arctic, the ocean heats up, the methane begins to release. You see the cycle here, and it's not good. To put the methane issue in context, there's thought to be 10,000 gigatons of methane in this reservoir in the Arctic. If only 60 tons of that are released, it will increase by 400% the warming gases in our planet. So the totality of what we face is indeed overwhelming. But again, I believe that if the geoengineering processes were stopped and the planet was allowed to respond, it would exponentially increase the odds of our situation being tenable. If the rain was not laden with aluminum, it would be acidic. That would invigorate the forest floor. We saw this last spring where they backed off on the spraying for about 4 rain events. And we saw immediate rebound of the forest, immediate. Nature is very resilient if it has a chance, if it's not being smothered under a toxic blanket. So, again, I have focused my entire life on this issue because I felt of all the issues we could be concerned about, and again, there are many, that if geoengineering is not stopped, we have little to no chance. And I believe the people in the military and other corporations that are carrying out these programs, I fully believe do not understand or comprehend what they are participating in. I believe there are, in fact, many honorable people in the U.S. military. Though I don't condone the adventures that they're being made to carry out around the globe, I do believe there are good people in the military. And I believe that in educating a population at large, as those in the military and others in the private sector engaged in these programs become aware of these, of the totality of what they're doing, the effects on their family, the effects on their children, I believe that's our best chance to bring these issues to a halt. On the many other issues that we could be concerned about, I believe that we are headed for a systemic collapse that is connected to many issues and ultimately connected to geoengineering as well. As the food supply is diminished, certainly that's happening as we speak, and the supply of resources is diminishing. We all know that the Middle Eastern conflicts are centered around hydrocarbon. I believe there is an inevitability to the reality we have known collapsing. But again, I believe that however close that may be, and I believe it's very close, that if the geoengineering is not stopped, we'll have nothing left to salvage. What will we have to work with, however renewable we try to make our lives, if our soils will not produce food, if our waters are so poisoned that life cannot be sustained in them, if every breath we take is laden with these materials that are so harmful to our own health that, according to internationally recognized neuroscientist Russell Blaylock, enter the spinal column, enter through the blood-brain barrier, lodge on cell receptors, and slowly but surely shut our systems down. So, again, this issue being a priority, whatever our concerns, if every breath we take is laden with this material, I would argue, how long will we fight anything? How long will we stand for any challenge? That if the house is burning down, and I believe geoengineering is that house burning down, then the landscaping in the yard would have to be neglected until the house is put out. And I believe, again, that's the comparison of what we face. In the words of James Kunstler, the fossil fuel fiesta, I believe it's nearing its end. And that being the case, and us being forced to survive on a smaller level, then the geoengineering, again, must be brought to a halt. And it's carried out, as I alluded earlier, too, by people who don't know what they're engaged in. Chris Hedges, many are familiar with him, just recently did an essay called The Careerists. This is people who, and I know many of them, scientists, biologists, academics, who they want to go to work at 8 and come home at 5. And they don't really seem to care what they're engaged in. It's just their job. But again, I believe that as these climate issues begin to change our reality, that will begin to change their attitude. That will begin to make people realize that there is no hiding from this issue. You can't put your head far enough in the sand to hide from what we face and what's coming. On what we can do, and this is the most important issue of all, because the future we face is dark indeed. That's a simple reality. People don't like to hear that. I did climate lectures before I got onto geoengineering because, again, I absolutely believe the science is crystal clear. Humanity has decimated this planet, period. And again, that does not mean I'm an Al Gore supporter. I am not. But when I got done with those lectures, everybody wanted me to say, if you buy a solar panel and a Prius, everything will be fine. And I simply couldn't say that because it wasn't true. The same is true with this issue, that however dire, and this is the superseding issue now because anthropogenic warming, I believe, cannot be stopped and is being in fact fueled by jet engines in this case. And so to focus on the geoengineering and bring that to a halt and allow the planet to respond is our best chance. And the way I believe that we can do that most effectively is to tell others and share credible data, to learn about this issue ourselves. We must educate it ourselves and not quote things that we really don't understand, or share data in a way that other people don't understand or relate to, because this must happen on a grassroots level. I have been in Barbara Boxer's office. I might as well have gone to an outhouse and beat my head on the wall. I've been in high-level EPA meetings in California EPA. One meeting was arranged by a congressional representative that I believe Deborah Whitman arranged, to her credit. And we were told to our face that the system is more or less rigged, that they are told to test for combustion particulates only. The rest of the sample goes out the window. It's very difficult to find what you're not looking for. California water quality amazingly quit testing for aluminum in 2002. They're not mandated to test again until 2017. This system has been rigged for a very, very long time not to show these issues. The best data we have found, and some of this is posted on geoengineeringwatch.org, they have been at this for some 50 to 60 years. This didn't start in 99. It was simply ramped up in 99. There are scientific studies on Arctic haze containing aluminum particulates going back 50 years. This is not new. Project Popeye in Vietnam, where weather modification was so successful that in 1976 the UN forbid weather manipulation in wartime. I believe that was mentioned earlier in some data. So this has been a very long and thought out process for the powers that be. That's why we see trails in kids' animated films. There's trails in Cars, the animated film Cars, Over the Hedge. This conditioning has been going on for a very long time. There are cloud books that name aerosol clouds as if they're natural. So I believe this is something that the powers that be thought they could carry on, maybe indefinitely, thought they could use to manipulate a population indefinitely without consequence to themselves, but they are wrong. And that's why, again, I bring up the methane issue, the disintegration of the polar caps. There are consequences to such actions, and we are seeing those consequences now. And all their planning for this total control will not reach the goal they had in mind. I absolutely believe that. In regard to what we can do, I need to ignore my notes and speak from my heart. In regard to what we can do, there's a math equation that I often use with people to point out how much difference they can make by sharing this with even two people, and maybe those two share with two. If you take a penny at the beginning of a 30-day month and you double that penny every day for 30 days, you have something in the order of 5.5 million. People think my math is wrong when I say that, but add it up, I'm not wrong. And if each person made it their mission to send a flaming arrow, this is my term for locating people, groups, organizations, ADD groups, Alzheimer's groups, autism groups, agricultural groups, the list is very, very long. If people made it a mission from their own home computer to locate these groups and to send them a credible article or two, to send them a site where they can find more data, to express to them the dire urgency of this issue, some of those flaming arrows catch. I've already experienced this with my own efforts, and this is something each and every one of us can do. The film that Michael Murphy made, and he's, by the way, one I feel very honored to call my best friend. I met him because of this issue. I've never met a more selfless and dedicated human being, and I hold him in highest regard. And the difference he has made already cannot be quantified, and I think the big wave is about to come. It's about to come. And I salute his efforts, and this is a common cause. And the difference each of us, again, can make from our own home computer or by mailing tapes out, in this case because he's allowed everybody to make as many copies as they want. The difference that can make cannot be overstated. When we leave here today, Michael and I are going to be at the Sacramento Capitol tomorrow to pass DVDs out to every representative there with a flyer designed specifically for them. And this issue is unique to others because it does affect those that would otherwise keep their head in the sand. Again, they cannot hide. It is also a common cause and a uniting cause. In Northern California, I get, at this point, more help from the Tea Party than I get from any other end of the spectrum. Once they know and realize that officials in the Obama administration, although, again, involves every presidency going back 5 to 6 decades, but once they know that, now it has legs. Now they see the reality of it. And nobody wants to be sprayed like a rat. Again, I believe the powers that be tested the water in this conference they held in San Diego 2 years ago. They tested the water to see if they might in fact be able to sell this to the public. Maybe they could put lipstick on it, you know, but the pig didn't fly. And so there's never been another conference that allowed journalists in. They saw that wouldn't work, so they went back underground. But again, because nobody wants to be sprayed, because the drought situation, now the derivative situation, which Michael Murphy pointed out so well, all these things are understood by all sides of the spectrum, including the Tea Party. And they should be reached out to because they, again, an event next week in Reading, they are helping me to organize for this subject. And this is what we all need to consider, that, again, this issue being the most paramount issue we face because it's decimating the ozone, cutting off our rain, poisoning our soils and waters, perhaps triggering methane release, which I promise you is a global game changer by itself. These programs hold life in the balance. Short of thermonuclear contamination, they will decide our fate. So this is a cause that if we reach out to those others and other groups and we unite with them, we share data with them, we must pull this load together. And it can only be done on a grassroots level because every door politically is completely cemented shut. We will not make progress in that arena, although I do applaud the efforts to file lawsuits, which I know is happening in 2 arenas, I believe, and this will bring attention to the matter. But the bottom line is, until people across the entire nation and indeed across the world are aware of this issue, aware of what they and their children are breathing, and become angry enough to grab the proverbial pitchforks and shovels, that is the only way this can stop. And again, in doing that, and military people becoming aware of this issue and themselves refusing to participate, that is how this issue could be stopped. And we can all be a part of that. We all should be a part of that. And I think if we do not lose hope and we focus our angst on effort, we use it as fuel to send the word out, to send the flaming arrows out, we can indeed perhaps turn this tide. But it's up to all of us. It's up to all of us to engage in this issue of sharing this data with people who don't know. We can't just preach to the choir. I believe all of you in here, I would have gone into more technical data, but I believe all of you are quite aware of the lethality of these programs, or you wouldn't be here. So now the goal is to educate those who don't yet know. That is the goal. And I believe I've outlined ways we can do that. If there are questions regarding the methane issues which I brought up and the climate processes that are now underway that are perhaps triggered by this issue, I'd be happy to answer those. Yes. Yes. I'm sorry, we got one here.
Yeah, you mentioned Siberia. Are they spraying over that area?
Yes. In fact, The question was, are they spraying over Siberia? If you look at a satellite image of the planet today, compare it to a satellite image of the planet perhaps 4 decades ago, it looks like a different planet. There are no open sections of ocean. And again, this is the elephant in the room. Academia certainly knows these programs are going on. The poles have been largely covered for a very long time, as near as we can tell. So yes, they are spraying the hell out of the poles. The whole planet, yes.
Yes. When you talk about statistics and the fact that we're being lied to by so many governmental agencies, how do you discern the difference between, like the sites where you're going for statistical analysis of the glaciers, how do you discern that the facts haven't been bent even from, how do you test those sources?
There is no credible data to dispute the melting of the polar caps. And you have to look at semantics. What you'll see publicized, and again, I mentioned that geoengineering can create, it appears, a short-term cooling in exchange for a long-term worsening of global warming. When you see scientists say that the Arctic has the same surface area as it did during the last 20-year average, that's a lot different than the mass. You have to look at the data. You will not find conflicting data. Although the surface area has in fact been expanded several times from, we believe, spraying and perhaps other chemical processes, the overall mass of the cap has plummeted. Ice that today should be 5 meters thick is 1 meter thick. It's about to break apart. The Arctic cap has hit its record low already, and there is a month left in the melt season there. Greenland, I believe, 2 days ago hit its all-time record low, and there are 6 weeks left in the melt season. The people who have disputed climate change are people paid for by the fossil fuel industry. But I am not here, I do not wish to bring an argument on climate change except in regard to its connection to geoengineering. If geoengineering had not been going on for the last 5 decades, perhaps the planet would be in much better shape. The planet would have been allowed to respond. Rain would have increased. In fact, for every degree of global warming, for every degree of planet temperature rise, 1 degree Fahrenheit, the atmosphere holds 7% more moisture. It should be raining excessively, but it is not. It is not because the planet is encased in a membrane of aluminum particulates, and it cannot respond. So the boreal forests are not getting the rain they so desperately need. And the rain they do get is laden with toxic metal particles and virtually killing the forest. So, and the ozone layer is being shredded, which also affects organisms from top to bottom. So again, I am bringing to attention the fact that the planet is in fact in meltdown, period. And that fact won't be hidden much longer. It simply won't be hidden much longer. But I bring that fact up again in relation to geoengineering, that if these programs had not been going on the entire time, if the true gravity of our situation had not been toxically masked at the cost of a much worsened overall situation by these programs, which they have no right to carry out. There's no regulation, no oversight, no consensus. They're simply carried out by those that thinks the atmosphere is a physics lab, which they can use for whatever purpose they want, which it is not. But these issues, again, which at this point I will hang squarely around the neck of geoengineering for the fact that although the human race has done much damage to the planet, the geoengineering, I believe, is pounding the final nails into our coffin, and it is the one thing left that we can fight for that still matters and that can still make a difference for our future. Sorry, another question?
Dane, I have a question about the scientists. Obviously, they're turning a blind eye or denying in large part or large measure to the phenomenon of geoengineering. How do we get some whistleblowers among these scientists?
I believe there may have already been. We had one call, geoengineeringwatch.org, that we thought was going to interview, and he went back into woodwork. Again, we must consider this is, I believe, unarguably the greatest crime in human history. Yes. They will go to great length to hide this. The ramifications of what they have already done are unquantifiable. Human respiratory mortality between 2005 and 2010 went from 8th on the list of mortality to 3rd. They are already killing us, period. And this is, whatever label a person wants to put on this, Agenda 21, eugenics, the fact is they know how lethal these particles are. And whatever their reason, they know what it's doing to us. And this is no different than sending our troops out with a set of goggles on to watch a nuclear explosion go off as if it wouldn't harm them. You know, this is how these people operate. But the bottom line is I believe that this will not be hidden much longer because of these climate events. Is there another question? Thank you.
You mentioned the methane. From my own research, there was and continues to be an enormous amount of methane released during the Gulf disaster, and I think that needs to be addressed as well. That's part of the bigger picture. And there's only one other thing I wanted to mention is that from Dr. Michael Castle's research on ethyl dibromide, which is a desiccant, which is part of this nightmare of aerosols. It's adding tremendously to the drought, and it's going into our lungs.
I believe you're correct on all counts, and I know Mr. Castle, and I believe you are direct on all counts. But again, there's a lot of intricacies that we could all get caught up on here. But the bottom line is the spraying must stop. And I think instead of complicating our life, and the methane issue, that is what we must focus on, and the intricacies are important, although we should focus on the target, and that target is sharing data. We have the tools in the tool chest now, especially with Michael's new film. We have some tools to work with. Now we have something we can do, something we can focus our energies on, and something that matters. And the methane released in the Gulf is of huge importance, but it does not compare with the reservoir releasing in the East Siberian Shelf now. But again, we can't do anything about all that. We can't change it. That's happening. What we can do is stop the spraying so the planet can respond. The planet must be allowed to respond.
You're right. They know. This is a genocidal program. We know that too, and they know that, and they say that. And in their documents, again, I go back to the Iron Mountain report and a number of other documents that we've been referring people to. But I think it's really important to say the facts, and it's a genocidal program. And,
well, if you could ask me a question, I mean, I think
yeah, I've got a question. My question is this. We know the plasma that they keep up is deflecting a lot of the microwave radiation frequencies and bouncing them back down to us, which is another form of illness as well, and that's part of the geoengineering program.
But your question? My
question is how I have not heard that expressed, or maybe I just missed it.
That it's reflecting a lot of the microwave frequency. Again, there's a lot of intricacies in this program, but we've outlined, I think, clearly the damage it's causing. And instead of getting too caught up on, if a person knows their head's on fire, they don't need to know 100 other details about things that are happening in their body. I mean, the bottom line is, this is a fight for life, period. If these programs continue, I think soon enough we'll have very little to care about. So we can all make a difference. We all have tools to work with now, thanks to Mr. Murphy. And if we reach out to people, share data with people, who knows what we can yet accomplish. But geoengineering should and must be a focus to bring to a halt. Thank you.